Hey, everybody, and welcome to episode 3 of the second season of Pete Carroll Was Right, the confusingly named Alabama football live video show. As always, it's Carter, Ben, and Mitch here to talk Alabama football with you. So this week we're going to be deep diving into the Ole Miss game. It's coming up this weekend in Oxford. And yeah, so here's hoping we don't lose 3 in a row.
That would be very nice. I would very much like to avoid 3 in a row. But I'm going to ask you guys this because I'm curious on one thing before we start. Speaking of 3 in a row, how do we feel confidence-wise about this game versus sort of how we felt the past 2 years?
I felt way more confident about it coming into the season than I had the past couple of years. But I am growing steadily less confident as we get closer to it, I guess.
See, that's sort of interesting because I'm growing more confident. So there's an interesting thing to get into later.
Please tell me that. Please tell me that watching the second half of the Florida State tape, convinced you that we're gonna cover the spread or something.
Well, I'm not gonna say we're gonna cover the spread, which I think, by the way, not to sort of, I'm not trying to influence anybody's gambling issues here, but man, if you were a betting man, take those points and run with them because 10.5 for this game.
That was shockingly high.
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking 4 or 5, maybe throw a half point in there somewhere, but. You tell me that I can take Ole Miss and Alabama can win by a touchdown and a field goal and I still win my money? I don't know. Where do I sign up for that? Because I don't know. Maybe it's a case of you always think whenever there's a good rule though that whenever you think Vegas fucked up, it usually is quite the opposite of what you actually think is going to happen.
Yeah. But Vegas is usually way more right than you are. So
I feel a little bit better. I felt better last year, at least going into the Ole Miss game than I do now.
See, I felt good last year. I was scared as hell in 2014.
Yeah,
I thought they were walking into a buzzsaw because it's that's the biggest game in Ole Miss program. In the Ole Miss football program in the last 20 years or something. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And that 2014 defense was good. Really good.
They were really good. They got worn out and they started to get hurt, but they were really, really, really good.
And so that, I think, is a key difference for this. Now, okay, Ole Miss's defensive line, and that's my main worry for this game. Ole Miss's defensive line is good. Speak and Jones and Haynes are
monsters.
Those guys are ballers.
Speaks is really good. Speaks is really, really good.
I am absolutely terrified about the thought of Speaks matching up on our interior guys on the O-line.
Yeah.
The rest of the Ole Miss defense, especially with Webster out for the year, and by all accounts, Tony Connor has not looked great after returning from injury.
Right.
The rest of the Ole Miss defense is not what it has been the last 2 years. They are definitely vulnerable on the back end.
So I guess this is sort of a good segue into maybe talking exclusively about this year's game, because let's just say this: last year's game, 2 years ago game, don't mean anything no more. So it's all about just getting this win. So no more hand wringing over fumbles on kickoffs or Jake tossing up interceptions, none of that. So point of concern, obviously, we'll get this out of the way immediately. Alabama interior of their offensive line against that Ole Miss defensive line, which is easily the most concerning matchup in this game for Alabama.
Yeah. And, Saban said, obviously you can't trust anything Saban says, but he did say yesterday that they had not decided who was going to start at the guard spots, which is concerning, to say the least. I would certainly feel comfortable if they had what I see as their best 5 out there, which to me from left to right would be Cam, Cotton, Ross, Shank, and Jonah. But then, that just sort of raises the question of, like, why isn't Ross playing center? Like, was there something, like, seriously wrong with him playing center? That's the reason they switched. Like, it's just he really has anybody not very closely connected to the program has any idea what's going on there, and it's a very odd situation.
It seems 100% certain that Bozeman is going to be the center, correct?
I don't think
he sort of made it seem like it's 3 guys for 2 guard spots, but the center wasn't even in play.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that he left. It really sort of seems like, like you said, you can't trust anything he says at this point. But he made it out, to me at least, that Cotton is sort of maybe going to be the guy who gets cut out here.
Yeah.
Talking about, like, the value of the experience that Piers Baker and Shank have, so.
Right. And if there's a certain sense of that, especially if you're really worried about the environment on the road, like, which that's completely understandable. Mm-hmm. I mean, with a line out there of Cam, Ross, Bozeman, Shank, Jonah, you get Cam and Bozeman, who were both in the lineup the last time they were in Oxford. You get Ross, who has a full year of starting experience. You have Shank, who is a redshirt senior with a full year of starting experience. And Jonah, who is the only guy besides Cam who's basically been in the same position since the very beginning of spring practice. So if your idea is to go for your most experienced, most veteran kind of guys, like, I guess that's the lineup you go for.
Yeah, and I'm fine with that. The truth is that I know a lot of people are upset because people think that they disrupted the continuity with the offensive line. But Piers Baker there for all of spring and fall, and then suddenly they change it up. Well, I'm trusting this coaching staff that there was a reason why they did that. Okay, and just that the situation with Ross at center had, for some reason, become untenable, and they just couldn't continue to go forward with that because you're not stupid. I mean, just because a bunch of guys on Twitter point out that offensive line continuity is very important does not mean that the coaching staff.
You think they don't know that?
Yeah. I think that they're pretty well aware of that fact. So I'm going to trust that there is a reason why they pulled the plug on that and installed Bozeman there.
Yeah. And Shank, Shank came in the game pretty early on Saturday.
Yeah, he did.
Played basically the whole game after that. So,
what do we think? Do we think this is going to be a nightmare matchup? I mean, do we think they're just going to get abused for 60 minutes? They dominated Florida State.
Yes, they did.
Up front. Even in the second half, even when Florida State started to make plays, it was still a pretty bad mismatch there. And I got to tell you, like, this Ole Miss front is a lot better than USC.
Yeah.
And you already highlighted the players. Speaks is really good, and Jones is really good, and Haynes is a great pass rusher. And they're deep too. They play like 6 or 7 guys along that defensive line. Mm-hmm. So, you're probably not going to be able to lean on these guys as the game goes on and wear them out because they keep rotating those fresh bodies in, and it's like 2015 Alabama. Yeah. They don't get tired. I think it could be bad.
Yeah. It's not a matchup certainly not a matchup you can count on winning. And I think a stalemate. It's sort of Hugh Freeze said in the SEC. It was like the teleconference this morning, and he said something about Alabama's defensive line, and we can talk about this matchup in a bit. But Alabama's defensive line, that they would consider it a victory if it was basically a stalemate. It happened, Hugh. I'm sorry.
It won't. But that's a good way to think about it, though.
Yeah. If you can win 50% of your battles up front against this, with the way this offensive in the interior of this offensive line is played so far, if you can win half of your matchups against the Ole Miss defensive front, that's a huge win.
See, I think a good goal. Oh, sorry, Mitch. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's all I was gonna say too.
I think a good goal is no busted assignments. Okay,
Yeah.
limit the negative plays, even if it means 0 yards on a first down carry or something. Don't let somebody breach a gap and take you down for a 3 yard loss or something, and all of a sudden you're not just behind the chains, but you're way behind the chains.
Like if you get beat, you get beat. Like, and when you match up a guy like Speaks against a guy like Ross or Bozeman, that's going to happen sometimes. But they can't afford mental lapses. Like they've got to play sound up front if they're going to have any hope of not getting destroyed there, basically.
So how do they run the ball?
Away from the interior.
Yeah,
but they tried that last year though. Remember how many wide runs they did last year? How many jet sweeps? I mean, that was a disaster.
But we talked about how this defense is a little bit like.
It is, but that I don't know if the front is so much different. I mean, yeah, no.
The front is not. I
mean, they're fast,
The front may be better, but if you can find a way to block the front and get really wide into that secondary, or even, I guess they only played 2 linebackers inside, but I expect to see a lot of jet sweeps, I think, this week, or attempted jet sweeps early on.
And to the extent that you're looking at traditional runs, I would expect stuff to go off tackle as much, because as bad as the middle of the line has been, Cam and Jonah, and Jonah is a true freshman going into a very hostile SEC environment, first time. That's a concern. But Cam is Cam and is looking very much like the player he could become this year. Like he's been fantastic, and Jonah has played really well too. So if you've got guys you can count on the offensive line, it's them. So
maybe a focus on Cam. I mean, I do think that one of the Alabama's best running plays is those tackle lead plays that they run, where Cam, especially with Cam, where he loops back around the left guard and he comes through and then the left guard kicks out. They've run that very well starting last year. Mm-hmm. So maybe we see some of that.
Some unbalanced line, maybe.
Yeah, that could be. You could try to work unbalanced line and flip Jonah over to the other side or something. But the other question is this though. Is this what's Alabama's so we've established that they're going to have trouble running the ball, and these are some ways that they could run it. Also, maybe before I get into that, they ran some more zone read against Western Kentucky than I expected.
They did, and apparently they practiced a lot this week.
Now that is interesting. See, I didn't know that.
I read in the practice reports yesterday, a couple of them said that they saw Jalen and Damian practicing the zone read handoffs a lot. Or working the mesh point, I guess is a better way of saying that.
See, that's very interesting to me. This time last week, we were talking about the fact that you can't just dabble in the zone read.
Yeah.
Yep.
So is Alabama actually going to make a real commitment to it? Because that would be interesting.
It would, and I mean, you've got a quarterback which let's not play into Saban's game here. Jalen Hurts is the quarterback. You've got a quarterback who's got the skill set to run it. I should look up some of his high school tape. I don't know what kind of. I would presume it's the spread offense. Every high school runs, except Vestavia, where Mitch and I went. That every other high school runs a spread offense these days. I swear, this is a complete aside. I'm sorry for all of you not going to know what this means. Like Vestavia versus it was like Homewood was on last year, just like on one of the local channels. So I was like, hey, I'm going to watch Vestavia play. First offensive play I watch is a fullback dive for
my God!
And I was like, Buddy Anderson is still the coach.
The Gumps love that though. So I mean, maybe you didn't so much.
Gumps would love Vestavia's.
Same jerseys for the last 30 years.
Yeah,
same offense.
Not a thing has changed. But lots of these guys run that play in high school now. So it's, as much as we harped on the fact that it's difficult to teach and that you have to have a commitment to it, there are way more guys that are coming in And it would not surprise me to learn that Jalen is one of them. I should really look that up, but like, it would not surprise me if Jalen were one of those guys who would already run that play in high school. So,
see, I actually thought that Jalen did a pretty decent job making the proper read against Western Kentucky.
Mhm.
I thought that Jalen's biggest issue was that he just wasn't taking the yards in front of him. So many times he tried to break it out wide.
He really needs to
just take the 6 or 7 yards north-south.
Right.
Yeah.
He has to stay more north-south. And that doesn't mean you always have to take a huge hit. You know what I mean? Just dive down, inside, somebody's legs or something. But
squirt through the hole and dive.
Right.
That's all you got. And that would be such a huge help to this Alabama offense right now, to be able to get those 4, 5, 6 yard plays, keep them ahead of the chains. That would be amazing.
Right. And that's the huge thing here, because our biggest concern. Okay, so obviously the more specific concern is the interior of the Alabama offensive line against the interior of the Ole Miss defensive line. But the larger concern, the broader concern here is, how does Alabama move the ball on standard downs? How do they stay ahead of the chains? And getting those 4 and 5 yard gains would be enormous.
Yeah.
So we see that as maybe a possibility. How else? How else do they stay ahead of the chains?
I think they're going to try to stretch the field horizontally a lot. I think you're going to see a lot of quick throws. I think you're going to, RPOs and stuff. Like, try to get whichever of our Darius or Calvin is out there on that true freshman that's replacing Kendarius Webster. If you have the numbers on that side, throw the screen. Throw it immediately and let one of those guys try to break it.
And the Tony Bridge is not very good either. I know he's been around there for a few years.
Neither of these corners is a particularly good player, to be perfectly honest.
And one of the safeties is a true freshman, and I don't really know much about the other safety, but they looked awful against Florida State. I mean, they were guys running free left and right. That is not a good secondary. Jalen needs to Jalen just needs to play well.
Yeah.
There's going to be guys open.
They need, honestly, that's, as simple as it is to say, like, ultimately what needs to happen for Alabama to win this game is Jalen Hurts needs to have a good game.
Yeah, that's how I see it too.
So much of what they're going to do just comes down to him. Like, if he can get time to throw, and thankfully he can have as much a role in that as the offensive line will. If he has time to throw and he makes good decisions, there will be guys open downfield. Like, these receivers are too good, and this Ole Miss secondary is not good enough. Like, they're gonna be plays to be made against throwing the ball, especially.
Don't you guys think the offensive line has been there's been problems in the run game on the interior, but they've been okay in pass pro.
Yeah. No, I there really haven't been, like. I mean, like, the very first play against USC when Barnett got sacked, or was that? No, it was the second play.
Oh, where it was fumbled.
In the first series. But they've really done a reasonably good job of, like, keeping the pocket clean. Certainly clean enough for a guy that's as mobile as Jalen is to have time.
Yeah, no, that's and I think, if they. I mean, the other thing is, like, formation-wise, I mean, I would like to see them really a lot of 3 wide sets, 4 wide sets, flex OJ out. Ole Miss, they play a lot of soft coverage on the outside to protect these defensive backs. Like you said, short throws, screens, quick hitches, little shallow crossing routes. I mean, get the ball into Jalen's hands and out of Jalen's hands as quickly as possible. Yeah.
And, we talked about last week that Jalen really didn't make a whole lot of it. Did basically nothing advanced in the passing game against USC. He didn't really go through any progressions or anything like that. He did a pretty good job of that on Saturday, actually. Like, we talked about the possibility, hoping that if Jalen were the quarterback, that they would, as, Saban's and Mitch's terms, the opening up, like, the bigger menu, opening up the playbook. Right. And they absolutely did that. On Saturday, they absolutely gave him more plays to do, and he did a good job. The problem was that he wasn't decisive. I think I saw a lot of times where he gets the ball and he looks at his first option, and his first option is not there. So he looks at the second option, and the second option is there, and he just hesitated.
Yeah.
So, like, if I could give him one piece of advice, is like go for it, Jalen. Like, don't, if it's there, take it. I guess that applies to both the running game and the passing game. Right. It's just like,
and how, but see, so. See, our path to victory for Alabama is for Jalen to play well, right? I mean, obviously.
Yeah.
But true freshman, starting here, first SEC start on the road, Ole Miss, that defensive front. I guess the other question, though, is how much rope is the staff going to give him as far as putting things on his shoulders? I mean, rope as far as he's the quarterback. I don't think that there's going to be a quick hook here or anything.
Yeah.
But I also don't know how much they're going to put on him as far as what they're going to ask him to do.
Yeah. That was actually going to be my question, because if you look at last year, I mean, I know Alabama was down for a lot of the games, so that kind of inflates this. I think they threw the ball like 60 times.
Yeah, probably.
A bunch.
And Florida State, I think Francois threw it like 50-plus times.
Yep.
So if you think about taking like a true freshman, I mean, I know we've seen good things from Hurts, but taking a true freshman into Oxford and throwing 50 times, I mean, do we feel good about that?
The secondary sucks. I mean, their secondary sucks.
Yeah. That's 50 dropbacks against that D-line, though.
Yeah. I mean, it all depends. Like, if they can't get anything in the running game, and I'm sure they will try like hell in a lot of different ways to get something, but if they can't, then that might be what you have to do.
Well, they don't have to be like 7-step drops. I mean,
Yeah.
Be like, this could be like, and don't even ask Jalen to go through his progressions. 3
Just
steps.
like,
3 steps, it's there, hit it. If not, tuck and go.
Yeah, like go 5 wide, give him a couple of shallow crossers. If one's there, take it, let your wide receiver and run. If not, like, take off. Like, it doesn't have to be like a serious. This is not like an NFL game we're calling here.
Yeah. I think, I mean, I love the strategy of trying to run through the air in games like this. Short, easy, high percentage throws to stay ahead of the chains. But I certainly see where Mitch is coming from as far as, like, that's a lot of dropbacks for Jalen.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a game plan you can necessarily feel confident about at this stage. I think that's what they may have to do, but I have no idea if they can be successful doing that.
We mentioned this to each other on our group text, and I think Ben may have mentioned it on Twitter, but moving the pocket with Jalen will be important too. I went back and counted. I think CFP Film Room had 12 dropbacks for Jalen against USC, and 4 of them were rollouts.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And everybody was making a big deal about that on Twitter, that we need to rollouts, move the pocket. You can't do that every time.
Right.
Like, there are limitations to that as a strategy.
Yeah.
But I think, as we have seen, like, that is going to be, like, they're going to do that with relative frequency.
Well, absolutely.
Right.
It helps Jalen, and look, Florida State had success with it too. You know what I mean? So it's clearly this is an avenue to make plays for Alabama in this game. But Jalen needs to make plays from the pocket. I mean, that's great that you can roll him out every so often and shorten the field and, let him hit some high percentage throws. And you can even go down the field if you want. You can throw like corner routes or something to a number 2 off a boot. But he's got to make plays. If people think they can somehow sort of strategize this game in a way where Jalen doesn't have to sit back in the pocket and make some throws here, you can't do that.
Yeah. Ben, our first question has come in.
Oh, God.
It's from at Anne Hathaway. She asks, is Taylor the answer to our O-line woes?
Oh, well, that is a good question, because I mean, that's a very good question, Ann. I think
he helps. I think he helps a lot if he's in that lineup and ready to go. is easily the best. Oh Lord, Houston almost had a pick six. He's easily the best interior run blocker that they've had that is on the team right now.
Absolutely,
I would say
he's he's a lot stronger than Ross.
Yes, they're like a much better physical specimen than Bozeman and Pierce Baker. I think Cotton has a lot of talent, obviously, but he's obviously not as advanced as the others.
Shank was a disaster in the Clemson game last year, and I feel like that sort of unfairly shaped some people's opinions on him. And then obviously he went out and had a pretty tumultuous offseason, but he's a good player.
Yeah.
He is not going to – this is not Chance Warmack stepping in and solving all of Alabama's problems up front. But I do think, though, that he should play.
Right.
I think he should absolutely be out there for every offensive snap. He's strong, he's athletic, he has his limitations clearly, but experience too. I mean, absolutely, I think that he should be out there. I just think that it's important to sort of like keep the expectations at a reasonable level because he's not some sort of savior. But I do think he's an improvement and a necessary step toward getting the interior of the O-line playing sort of more effectively and executing more consistently.
Agreed. Okay, where were we?
We were. We were.
Yeah. So I'll pose this question: What is your Lane Kiffin? What's your first offensive play?
Let's take a shot.
Mine is. I'm gonna under center, fake the handoff, bootleg, go deep to Ardarius.
I feel like that's the easiest answer to what's your first play.
But we know what it's actually going to be, right?
It's going to be a jet sweep.
It's going to be a jet sweep.
There's no other answer. It's Lane's favorite. I mean, the
jet sweep to Calvin.
Yeah, I mean, the USC people will talk till their heads fall off about the bubble screens he used to call there. But
the jet sweep is
the new bubble screen.
Let's fake the bubble screen and throw deep. That's what I say.
Oh, yeah. That fake screenplay, though. Our favorite play. Our favorite play. Let's bust that out.
No, that's kind of a point I wanted to make, actually. Last year, I thought Lane did a good job of saving some of those type plays for when we kind of needed it. So, say, using Jake as like a runner. He saved that kind of until against Florida, and he saved kind of the fake screen with OJ until Clemson. For me, this season, I use everything, or for me in this game, use everything you can against Ole Miss. Like, I feel like this is kind of if you have some plays you want to use, use all of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If you're confident in Jalen running the play, then you use it in this game because the schedule sets up so well, and not even talking about the potential that Tennessee and LSU just aren't nearly as good as we thought that they would be. The schedule's really nice for them after this game. They have a while to keep Jalen growing in the offense, to get him more and more reps, to have the offensive line have time to gel. But they have to win this game.
Well, that's the thing. Right. Because, and I've talked about this before too. This could be a great team come mid-October.
Yeah.
Because those issues that we talked about, quarterback, interior of the offensive line, defensive line depth, and the one corner spot, those could all be solved or pretty close to solved by the time the schedule picks back up again. You know what I mean? I think this could be, I said this on Twitter today, I think that starting in mid-October through the end of the season, this has a very real chance to be Saban's best team.
And and I would absolutely agree with that. And so it's just so many of the things about this team that are shaky right now can get better as they keep going and keep working on it. There's no need to hold anything back that you've got right now. Throw the kitchen sink at Hugh Freeze.
Just survive
on Saturday.
Survive the game.
Get through this game. Right, exactly.
Yeah. Now, one of the other things, because I know we got to move on to the other side of the ball, but in terms of the offense, and we want throws, and I want throws too, but they play a lot of 2 deep safeties.
Yeah.
They split those safeties back there a lot, which means, even box count, ultimately Alabama might also have to run this football to be successful.
Right. Like if you're running a lot of RPOs, like a lot of times
the read is going to be
the read is going to be run.
Yeah. I don't mean to I really do believe, and this is such a cop out, but I really do believe that a lot of times football comes down to his execution, guys playing well. Jalen needs to make throws from the pocket, and the interior of the offensive line, they need to be able to block it up sometimes and let Alabama run the ball on Saturday.
Like as much as, like for Alabama to win this game and not have it be, coming down to for them to win comfortably, ultimately the offensive line is just going to have to play better. Like we can say, oh, you do this, you do that to make up for weaknesses, for unfavorable matchups, but ultimately they're just going to have to play better.
Yeah. But I do believe this though. If Jalen plays a good game, Alabama wins this by 2 scores.
Yeah. And I think that's a good transition to the other side of the ball. The good news is that for all that we talked about the interior matchup in the trenches when Alabama has the ball, expand that to the entire offensive and defensive lines when Ole Miss has the ball. Alabama will and should whoop Ole Miss at the point of attack across, the edges, on the interior. They are better than Ole Miss categorically.
You don't need to look any further to know that than to read into a little Saban speak here when he talked about the fact that what was the exact quote here?
That they're
he said there's talent, but there's they're a little inexperienced along the offensive line.
You quoted it.
Yeah,
he doesn't use "but" a lot when he's talking about other players or position groups.
I remember after the Mississippi State game last year, he said something at his press conference talking about the Alabama defensive line versus the Mississippi State offensive line. And he said something like, we felt, we could make some plays here, which is Saban speak for, we thought that we were going to completely dominate this matchup for 60 minutes.
No, exactly.
And we were going to terrorize them up front, is what he really meant to say. So did you find the quote?
No, not yet.
That's what I was going to ask, though. Do we think this is going to be Mississippi State 2015 bad for Ole Miss?
I think it could be a bloodbath.
Yes.
I think it could be.
That is a very good analogy.
That's the goal. I mean, that's the goal, right? I do want to say one thing, though, while Carter looks for this. I want to say one thing. Alabama, it wasn't, they didn't terrorize them, but in 2014, the Alabama defensive line really had their way with the Ole Miss offensive line, and Alabama still lost the game. So dominating this matchup goes a long way toward helping them win, but you're not going to win the game by this alone.
Right.
And because and I think we'll get into some of the issues that Alabama might have defensively against Ole Miss, but there are ways for Ole Miss to combat these issues. Certainly, it makes things much more difficult for them if you're getting whooped up front, off the ball the whole game. But I mean, they can still do some things. But yeah, no, important to get it out of the way and make it very clear. I expect Alabama to completely dominate up front.
I can't find the quote.
It was something about their lack of experience.
Right.
But it's not really important exactly what he said. The point, though, is that you can read into that saying that he feels like that's a matchup where Alabama can win.
Yep.
Before we go further, we do have additional questions. One from @Corey Paul, who asks, with the addition of Coach Sark, do we lose Lane next season? If so, where to?
Ooh. Should we say that for the end?
Yeah, let's save that for the end. The other question is from Abe Brick at my BS tweeter, who asked, "Can Ole Miss's defensive line exploit the weakness UA has in the interior?" I think we've answered that with a resounding yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So there's that. That was a timely question, considering that. Yeah. It's certainly expect Alabama to completely dominate up front at every level. I want to say especially Jonathan Allen should have a monster day. DeMarcus Walker had 4.5 sacks. 4.5 sacks in one game.
In like a half.
That's some Derek Thomas shit right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so
and he doesn't, as talented as Florida State is, he doesn't have the kind of guys around him that John Allen has.
I mean,
for this.
Guys, like, they should think about John at 3 technique going one-on-one with some guard, and then you got Tim Williams and Ryan Anderson on the outside working on those tackles, and that's not to say anything about Deron Payne at nose, lined up and driving people in the backfield. I mean,
yeah. They're gonna.
It should be a bloodbath.
It should be, and that, like we said, that's not going to win the game by itself, but it'll go a long way. The bad news is that, okay, so DK Metcalf is out for the year. Who had, he had already caught like 2 touchdowns for them, so that is a fairly big loss for Ole Miss.
That first touchdown was such bullshit, though, that he caught. Wasn't that the one that, like, the fade that was underthrown and it was tipped up and he caught it or something?
Yeah. But the receiving core is still fairly deep.
Yeah, they are.
Stringfellow and Attaboy Joe, I can never remember how to pronounce his name. And
AJ Brown or something.
Yeah, the freshman, and then obviously Evan Ingram. So they still have plenty of weapons.
Right.
Chad Kelly is obviously a guy who will make he will make bad decisions, and so that's sort of the hope with the mismatch all along in the trenches. There is that he'll make bad decisions on his own, but hopefully they can force him into several of those. But eventually he's going to get some balls off, right. And he's got a hell of an arm and he's got good receivers. They're going to make some plays.
Yes.
Like, it's just going to happen.
So I have 3 concerns. I want to talk about these one by one. I have 3 concerns for the Alabama defense. The first, and this is sort of segues into what Carter's talking about, they're going to hit some plays. Kelly's a good quarterback. Ingram is a hell of a player. That offense creates situations where they put linebackers and stuff in run-pass conflicts, and it creates opportunities for guys to be wide open in different parts of the field. So there are going to be plays on Saturday where Ingram is running down the seam and there's nobody near him, and Kelly's going to throw it, and it's going to be a 30-yard gain, and it's going to suck, but it's going to happen. I mean, it's just inevitable.
Yeah.
Limit those, pressure Kelly, hope that it's not a situation where that's happening each possession. You know what I mean?
Right.
But it's just like, I just think it's important to sort of set the standard here, or set the baseline that this is going to happen.
Yeah.
The second thing, and this is sort of a more interesting topic, they're not going to be able to run the ball at all. And they're not even going to try.
No.
I don't think.
Yeah.
I don't think Hugh was even going to try to run the ball.
Judd might get
that
10 carries.
Right.
That was one thing last year. I liked how much they tried to run it. Because
Yeah.
it was just a waste of play every time
It's
they
a waste
tried
of it
to.
down, yeah.
And they're not going to make the same mistake this year. So what they're going to try to do, which is what they did a lot against Florida State, is they're going to try to run through the air on standard downs. They're going to throw all these short balls to they're going to do what Clemson did, basically. They're going to spread you out, and they're going to throw all these short balls to the number 3, which is usually Ingram. And I don't know how you stop that. I don't know how you stop, because, what do you do defensively? You want to play two deep safeties. If you want to play 2 deep safeties, then you got to keep that second linebacker sort of inside, which is going to create opportunities for easy hitches or easy out routes to that number 3. You want to. So you could do that, and you could just give up the yards, and you could say, okay, we'll play from 2nd and 5.
Yeah, and I a lot of times against against plays like that, there's not a lot you can do. I mean,
Right.
you think about watching the Patriots when they've been at their best in the last decade or so. You've got a guy like Tom Brady throwing underneath to guys like Welker and Edelman and Gronk, and sometimes those plays, those little quick hitches, those quick slants and stuff like that, they're just, you can't defend them really.
Right.
And so a lot of times what you have to do is just count on your guys to play sound and flow to the ball and tackle and keep those short gains as short gains.
Yeah, that's the big thing. That's the big thing. You talked about it would be a win for Alabama up front on the offensive line if they can play it to a stalemate. Well, let's play these short little standard down passes to a stalemate too. You know what I mean? Let's have the defensive line manage to tip some balls or something, right? Or let's get some off-target throws from Kelly or some drops from some of these guys, and always rally to the ball and always tackle, okay? And maybe every so often you change it up and you buzz a linebacker underneath Ingram or something to take away the throw, or you change it up and you play single high safety and you bring Eddie Jackson or Ronnie Harrison down to press Ingram, to play him tight and take away the short stuff. So just play it to a stalemate, I think, right?
Yeah.
Because there's no other strategy here. Now, the issue, though, is that they're going to do that and they're going to play single high. And you know what's going to happen when they play single high and they don't split those safeties.
Ted Kelly is going to be throwing at 28 all night long.
Yeah, and 29. They're going to make 29 play the ball in the air also. He's not sort of, accepted from this whole thing because
he's not Marlon.
Right. They're going to do that. I mean, that's going to be a hold your breath on every play type of deal when they throw those fades and those fade stops and they go at 28. Let me tell you, this is all teams want to do is they want to go at 28. We talked all week last week about how 28's the issue. First play of the game, Western Kentucky takes a shot down the left side against 28. I mean, this is one of those things where it's just so obvious. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, especially when you go against a defense like Alabama's, and it's, well, we're at a disadvantage here, and we're at a disadvantage here, and we're at a disadvantage here. So let's try to mitigate those disadvantages and pick on this one little possible advantage that we have. Because when Kelly does a 3-step drop and throws a stop fade or a fade at 28, it don't really matter if
your pass rush can't get there. It doesn't matter how good you are.
Right. It doesn't matter that Marlon's locking the guy down on the other side. It doesn't matter that Eddie's locking down the deep middle. It doesn't matter that your defensive line is so much better than that their defensive line so much better than the offensive line. All that matters is that jump ball and that contest there with the wide receiver and 28. It's the only thing that matters. It's kind of a brilliant strategy.
Yeah. He's just going to have to win some of those balls.
Yeah. He's just going to have to win some of those balls.
Did you watch him? I can't say that I watched him terribly closely on Saturday. Did he look any better to you?
I didn't watch him. I didn't watch him terribly closely. I don't know. He's got to – I want to see him challenge these guys to the line. I want to see him try to disrupt releases. Yeah. And I want to see him be aggressive in the air. And if he picks up some defensive pass interference penalties, then oh well.
Yeah.
But I want to see –
the NFL. Like, you can take a couple of those 15-yarders instead of a 30-yard completion.
There's no spot fouls here, In the same way that it's like – but we should also say this. A perfectly thrown fade or a perfectly thrown stop fade, a lot better corners than 28 are going to have issues with those.
Yep.
So sometimes there's nothing you can do. But again, play it to a stalemate.
Yeah.
Right.
Play that to a stalemate. Play the other stuff to a stalemate. If you can do that, then your huge advantages in other areas of that matchup should be able to be a decisive factor here.
Yeah. Because as much as on the quick throw, on the short throws, and the fades and the stop fades and all those things, your pass rush and your other guys out there may not make as much of a difference, but on the other plays, which ultimately are going to be the majority of the plays, they do matter.
Yeah.
Like, Alabama's defense is very good, and if they can just hold up on the plays that are hard to defend, they're going to win most of their other battles.
That's how I see it too. Yeah, and I will say this: you can't hide 28 in this game. You can't spend time rolling
Nope.
coverages over to him. You can't spend time doing that. He's just got to play a good game. He's just got to compete, and he's just got to win some of those plays. That's all you got to do is just win some of those plays. Let me ask you guys this. How decisive is Alabama's advantage in the trenches going to be? I know I got through earlier saying you can't win the game on that alone. But how debilitating for the Ole Miss offense is that matchup going to be?
I think it's going to be a pretty serious mismatch. I mean, they got wrecked in the second half against Florida State, and this defensive front is a lot better than Florida State's.
Can Alabama hold them under 20 points?
If they do well on those 50-50 plays, yes.
I think 2021 is a good line I would put on it, barring obviously special teams touchdowns or fumbles.
No. I just mean offensive.
That kind of stuff.
I just mean offensive points.
Yeah. I think 2021 is probably fair.
Yeah, I guess. That's a tough. It's just.
Do you think it's tough for the offense to do more than that?
It's just like if you can't run the ball, right? And if your quarterback's being pressured the whole game, you're going to make some plays in the areas that we talked about, but you shouldn't be able to make enough plays to sustain enough drives to score 4 or 5 touchdowns.
Yeah.
You just shouldn't be able to.
Sorry, were you saying that? Do I think Ole Miss can score like you're expecting it to be?
Either way. I mean, where do you see it on that side of the coin?
Under 21.
Well, if they score under 21, Alabama's going to win this game.
Yeah.
Because they're going to be able to make enough plays, and the defense is going to be able to force some mistakes. Alabama should be able to get in the 20s.
If the defense can force some plays outside of the X's and O's,
that's what I would love to see. I would love that.
That's going to be the biggest difference maker for Alabama in this game, I think.
They changed last year. They changed the Georgia game. They changed the Texas A&M game by making these plays outside the X's and O's.
They have a pick 6 in each game thus far this season.
Yep. I mean they changed the game with those plays. Last year, the game in Starkville changed on Cyrus's punt return. The defense has got to be. I mean, I know we've talked about this before. 2011 LSU. Make some plays outside the X's and O's, turnovers, interceptions, fumbles, all that stuff. I mean, it'd be great if they were scoring on these, but even if you're not scoring, you know what I mean?
Just give the offense a short field.
That's what they need. They need some turnovers. The turnovers are going to change the game. 2 years ago they got a defensive score against Ole Miss also, and it didn't quite add up. But the point is that these plays have such a huge impact because they're not like earned yards. You know what I mean? And they're not like earned yards. They're not earned points. Not in the sense of like a really clean 75-yard 8-play drive. So they flipped the game, and I think it would be great if Alabama could hit you with a few of those on Saturday.
I think if Alabama gets a defensive or special team score, they win the game.
Or even just set up like a gimme touchdown.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Right. It's the same thing for all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's it. We haven't talked about special teams much, but I feel like this is going to be maybe the most important game for each of the specialists on this schedule.
Do we think that J.K. is looking better this year after sort of a little sophomore slump?
Yeah.
Okay. So that's an advantage.
And he's kind of a gamer too. He has his best games in some of the biggest games.
Yeah.
Yeah. Remember the way he kicked in the Sugar Bowl 2 years ago?
Oh my God! Or how about against Mississippi State 2 years ago? Well, play like that, and that's a huge thing too, right? Because there's one inevitability here, which is that Alabama's going to go 3-and-out, and they're going to do it. They're probably going to go 3-and-out in half their possessions. I mean, honestly, there are going to be a lot of times where we're going to be watching this game and watching that offense, and we're going to be like, this is so freaking frustrating. Because
it's going to be painful at times.
It is going to be can't stress that enough. Alabama offensively, and I'm not telling anybody something they don't already know because y'all watched the last 2 games, but especially against Ole Miss, this is going to be very, very, very painful. It could be more than half the possessions. I mean, you could be talking about like 2/3 of the possessions are just going to be like nothing.
Yeah.
But they can win that way if they hit some plays, if they hit some big plays, put together one drive, create short fields. Those are the things that they're going to need to do.
Right.
And I kind of think that they will.
Honestly, if you ask me how I think the game goes, I think the defense does what the defense does. Ole Miss is going to hit some plays. That's how it is. But I think they give up between 14 and 20 points. I think the defense creates a big, like, outside the X's and O's play, turnover, a pick six, something like that, that helps out the offense. And the offense is just they're going to be frustrating most of the afternoon, but they're going to hit 2 or 3 big plays, and they're going to get a couple of assists from the defense, and they're going to pull it out.
When you look at Ole Miss and you say they are weak in the defensive backfield and they are weak up front offensively on the offensive line, those are if you're weak in those 2 areas, that typically is a recipe for big plays.
Yeah.
The opposing offense making big plays in the passing game, and the opposing defense really getting after your quarterback and forcing mistakes. If there was ever a game in which Alabama should be able to make some big plays, it's this game.
Yeah.
I mean, that's sort of how I feel, and I think that just give me 2 or 3 big plays, and that should be enough.
So going back to the specials, honestly, I don't even know what to expect from Adam at this point.
Yeah.
If he hits every field goal under 40 yards, that's
fine.
That's all I need. That's all I need. I don't need him to be Roberto Aguayo or apparently the younger Aguayo. Apparently they got a whole whole line of them. Just give me the easy field goals, and that's A+. Did y'all notice on Saturday that Diggs was taking all of the punt returns?
After we thought that Calvin looked sort of uncomfortable against him.
Yeah, I don't know that we mentioned it on the show, but yeah, we thought Calvin looked kind of shaky.
Yep.
Fielding punts.
Very uncertain. I mean, he hadn't even done it in high school, so.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can tell. I said this on Twitter after the game. You can tell the staff really likes Diggs.
Yes, they do. They do.
He played. He was out there for every return snap. He played at receiver and safety in granted in mop-up time, but like
they want to
the
get
fact
him
that they had they want him on they want him out there making plays. You can tell this is a guy they really, really have a lot of hopes for.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. So maybe he hits one. Maybe he hits a big play or something.
Yeah, you get a return.
Why not?
That would be nice.
Let's do something we haven't done. Let's do predictions.
Oh no.
Let's do a little. You want to do a little predictions?
All right, we can do it.
You want to do just no?
We do like point scores. Points for teams.
Let's throw some scores out. I'm not big into predictions either, but it's fun.
It's fun.
It's fun.
I would say 24-14 Alabama.
Okay, I like that. Mitch?
I'll go 30-13.
Ooh.
Alabama.
Okay.
I like that gump. I like that gumping.
And I'll go 27-10 Alabama.
Oh, okay.
I'm confident. I'm confident.
All right.
I'm confident. Right. I think that Alabama's going to hit big plays. I think they're going to dominate up front on defense. I think they're going to I think these players have waited a long time to get back on this field.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that it's going to be – I think they're going to play a good game. I really do. And I think Jalen's going to play well.
Yeah.
So before we finish, let's revisit the question.
That's what I was going to say.
It is interesting. We didn't talk about this last week because we were so focused on the games.
Yeah.
But, if you go back and you look with Lane, bringing him in, right?
Yeah. And, like, they didn't hire him as an offensive analyst like this, but, the writing was on the wall.
Bringing him into the fold, into the program fold, Lane is going to take a head coaching job at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And after this year, his salary, but he's still making a lot less than he was a year ago when he was getting money from USC. He's been sufficiently rehabilitated in terms of his coaching ability. If he feels that he is ready to run a program and he gets a job that he likes, I think he will take it. Where that is, I have that is going to depend so much on how the rest of the season goes and which jobs open up.
See, that's the interesting question. This is huge for Lane because this is probably his last chance. If he fails again as a head coach, he's not getting another opportunity.
Right.
At this point, it's just like the lifespan of the coach, You don't agree with that?
Somebody's always going to give him a chance.
Well, okay, but I mean, that's true. Muschamp did get the South Carolina job. But see, I love Boom though, so I'm not going to say that. I'm not going.
Somebody's always. I mean, he's a big enough name. Like he's had success. He'll always have success as a coordinator. Somebody will always want to take a chance on him.
This isn't the NFL, I guess, where there's like a finite number of jobs. Like this is
the question is if he fails at the next one, does he become content with just being a coordinator?
Yeah, but okay. Let me say this though. Okay, so look, you're right. There'll always be some school that's going to take him. But is a school going to take? Is like a good school going to take him? Is he going to get like a quality job?
I mean,
not. I think if he fails at the next one. If he gets another head coaching job after that, he would have to work his way up. He's going to have to start at a small program and prove that he can be a good head coach.
Yeah, that's how I feel. But Mitch,
and then as far as
I see Mitch is looking at us. He says Lane's gonna fail his next job and he's gonna get the Patriots job or something.
That's the thing about the NFL.
Soon,
The NFL coaching hires are always retreads.
Yes.
Everybody's afraid to take a chance like you can fail your way through 6 NFL jobs and someone. I think NFL is even more of a retread league, despite the fewer number of jobs than college football. Like you think about guys who fail repeatedly at college football, they end up coaching like D2, D3 schools.
Yeah.
Like I was just reading today on the college football subreddit that John L. Smith is now the head coach at some like D2 school. So like when you fail at college football and you fail repeatedly at the highest levels, people don't want you for a while. Like you get knocked down the totem pole. Whereas in the NFL,
you get better. You get NFL opportunities if you fail in college, apparently. Like
if you're
Chan Gailey in Buffalo.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
see, that's the thing. Like colleges, when they hire a coach, they want a success, and they're not afraid to take a chance on that. But NFL teams, for some reason, they want to hire the guys who failed. Like when Chan Gailey and Doug Marrone were getting hired as NFL coaches, I was like, what in the world? Like, why?
I know.
Well, we need to get back to the question. We need Lane to go take a job for 3 or 4 years and then come back home.
Oh man, don't even. See, that was it. I should have known. I should have known. We can't even have this discussion because I should have known. I'm just going to turn this into Lane. Come on.
Lane, and then I'll say, as far as who replaces Lane, I mean, I think.
I'm sorry. Lane is not the next head. Lane is not the next head coach at Alabama. I don't want to. Mitch Saban leaves after this year. Mitch is like, it's cool. We got Lane take over.
He didn't even have to leave. He just steps into the other office.
Mitch, you ready? How about we just? You know what we should do? What we should have done after this year when Kirby left, Nick should have just been demoted to defensive coordinator and Lane should have been promoted to head coach. That's what really should have happened. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah, that ass chewing was just for show. That was
We know who's really. You're not fooling us, Nick. We know who's really in charge.
All right, Nick, you got to yell at me. You got to yell at me now. You sure, Lane? You sure?
Yeah, it's just all Nick is like the Queen of England, okay, and Lane is the guy who's really
Lane
got
is
all
the
the
prime
power.
minister. The prime minister of Alabama. Okay, so for the second part of the question,
Who would take over? Because there is a good chance. I do agree that there's a good chance that Lane
I think there's an extremely good
Okay.
chance that it's Sark.
Now,
Yeah,
Sark's a great choice because.
Oh
first of
yeah,
all,
I think I would be totally on board with Sark as the next offensive coordinator.
Saban loves continuity.
Yeah,
As far as his coordinators go, you know what I mean? Especially on the defensive side of the ball, but even on the offense, clearly he's happy with what Lane has done the past, couple years. Sark obviously is basically Lane light, considering, what was he, the wide receiver coach when Lane was offensive coordinator in in Southern Cal?
Yeah.
So
Sark?
yeah.
They were co-offensive coordinators.
Or they eventually were co-offense. Okay, so it's even more like, I mean, yeah.
Speaking of did y'all know that Tosh Lupoy is co-defensive coordinator?
Yes, I did.
I just learned that today.
I just learned it too. I learned it like a week ago.
I had no idea that was a thing.
Yeah, he's really made a name for himself pretty quickly.
The guy who posed the question asks Lane to Houston, Herman to Auburn, and to that I say, God, I hope not. That is literally my nightmare. That is my nightmare.
You guys know what the only thing worse would be, though?
Lane to LSU?
No, Lane to Auburn.
Lane at Auburn would be terrible.
Lane at Auburn would be funny. Lane at Auburn would be fucking hilarious. Okay,
that would be the epitome of like dark comedy for me.
But
that would be. I'm not.
No, that scenario was my personal nightmare because I love Lane and I hate U of H because those of y'all who don't know me, I went to Rice. So I hate U of H and I love Lane, and that would be terrible. And then I like Herman. He's a really good coach, and I do not want a guy that good at Auburn. So that is my personal nightmare.
Herman at Auburn would be interesting. That would be interesting. Yeah. Or Herman at LSU.
Yeah. I just I am crossing my fingers that both Lane and Gus win just enough this year to keep their jobs, because I am so afraid that I do not want one of them to hire Tom Herman.
So let's win this game so we can throw the Iron Bowl and go into the SC Championship with one loss, just to save his job.
There's a strategy right there.
That's some Bob Myers, Joe LaCobe light years thinking right there. It's light years ahead of the game.
Is Lane? That's interesting, because I'm thinking, I was always thinking about Lane, the possibility of him. He's going to take over a program who just fired their head coach, you know what I mean, and is down and needs to build back up, instead of like a Houston who loses their head coach, right? So that's interesting. That would be a good situation. That would be a good spot for Lane.
Yes, it would. As much as I would hate it, it would be a really good spot.
That'd be a good spot for him, because he needs to see results right away when he becomes a head coach.
Yes, yeah,
and
he is not going to have much of a grace period wherever he goes.
And that's the kind of place. I mean, he's going to be able to be in a situation in Houston where he's going to have results, and they're even recruiting, which is crazy.
Yeah,
they have a 5-star, right?
Yep.
Well, one, yes.
But hey, come on!
Yeah.
That's a group of 5 team with a 5-star recruit.
Yeah. And if you schedule it the right way, you have maybe 2 tough games a year.
Well, then Lane is hoping that Tom goes somewhere else because.
Oh God, please don't.
Tom to USC.
Well, that's what we're hoping. Yeah.
Yeah, go far away.
Keep Tom out of it. Yeah. Because I mean, yeah, Tom to USC, Lane to USC.
That's what I was.
I wouldn't be surprised if. I don't think the Texas job, assuming that Charlie Strong doesn't fall apart, I don't think that job. But Herman is very much a Texas guy. He was Rice's offensive coordinator in 2008 when we had our best offensive season ever.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So he's very much a Texas guy. Like if the wheels fall off on A&M this year.
I was about to say that. I was about to say that. What if A&M goes down the tubes?
If the wheels fall off on A&M and they fire Kevin Sumlin, then for me, my most likely scenario is Herman to A&M.
That's interesting. Yep. What about Herman to Baylor?
Is that a step up from Houston right now?
Well, that's a good point. Obviously, Baylor does obviously.
Well, you're already in the Big 12 instead of having. If Houston gets into the Big 12, right. if Houston gets into the Big 12, it's not a step up. It's not a step up.
Right.
But what does being in the Big 12 really help Herman with?
Well, it's got to help for recruiting, right?
Yeah, I think so.
You don't think so?
Honestly, I don't know. Think about who their opponents are for 12 games out of the year. Like, it's teams that are going to recruit. Like, if they keep up kind of the pace they're at, for the opponents they're going to face 10 games out of the year, they're just going to win on sheer talent alone.
Houston.
Yeah.
Houston is, yeah.
But don't you think, there are going to be kids. There are kids who are looking and they say, well, we might be interested in Houston, but we want to go to a power conference.
Yeah, we want to play at, I think, trust me, as a guy who went to a school that used to be in a power conference and is no longer in it, you cannot underestimate the impact that has on the resources that it brings to the school, on the exposure that it gets you.
Yeah. Also, what about this? Do they have? You'd have to say that. Well, see, do they have?
Plus, if you're in a Power 5 conference and you really feel like you can build a great program, if you're in the Big 12 and you go undefeated, you're in the playoff. You have a chance to play.
That's what I was going to say. If you're
Houston,
right?
Maybe.
But they're not going to go undefeated in the Big 12, though.
No.
Because power conference teams just don't go undefeated.
Right.
Alabama doesn't go undefeated. Nobody goes undefeated.
Yeah. Right.
So, but they could go undefeated, but they go 12-0, and if they schedule games like against Oklahoma or whatever, you know what I mean, and get you a real one or two really quality wins, they go undefeated. Look, if Houston goes undefeated this year, they're in.
Yeah.
They're a lock, don't you think?
I think so. Yeah.
And there may be a discussion if they lose one game.
There will be people calling for it if they lose one game. It's not going to happen if they lose one game.
Because the other, because
we'll see.
You think so, Mitch? You think at one loss?
I think there will be a discussion. I'm not saying they'll make it, but I think there will be a discussion.
Because most of the other major conference winners are going to have only one loss.
Yeah.
You think they're going to get in over a one? Because they're not going to get in over a one-loss major conference winner, right?
No. Well, maybe.
They get in like last year. 2-loss Stanford wins the Pac. Wins the Pac. Right. They would get in over them, maybe.
I think there's a discussion if it's 3 1-loss or 4 1-loss, and then I think it's a definite if there's not enough 1-loss teams.
They beat the shit out of Oklahoma.
They did.
Yeah.
It all depends. If they pull away tonight, I'll note that it's 10-10 at the half against Cincinnati.
Really?
If they pull away tonight,
but it's Tubby.
It is Tubby, and
that's classic Tubby.
He finds a way in these games.
Yeah, and it's a weird things happen on Thursday nights, but
Tubby's built. Tubby lives for these games.
He does.
Yeah.
So say they pull away tonight and really put a pounding on Tubby, and then Oklahoma comes out on Saturday and just beats Ohio State. Wins against Ohio State. And then, let's say Oklahoma wins the Big 12 and Ohio State wins the Big 10. Even with one loss, Houston probably in that scenario.
I could see it, yeah.
Yeah. And those are realistic scenarios.
And I'm saying that those will probably exist. If you look at Houston, if they recruit well enough, they'll just win 10 games a year on talent alone. And they have. Right. No, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. They'll have. So that gives them 2 tough games. At worst, they kind of split 50-50, right? You schedule it just right. You beat somebody like Oklahoma, and maybe you lose your other one, whatever. If you're a 1-loss Houston every year, you have to think eventually you're going to make the playoff, right? About as often.
Yeah, that's right. It was one thing Boise State. It was one thing for Boise State trying to get, or Boise State or Utah trying to get in when it was just 2 teams.
2 teams, right?
But obviously, but obviously those.
There were years when Boise State would have made it if
it was 4, right?
Yeah.
And in 2008, Utah probably would have made it.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, so you're Tom Herman, and you say, well, come to my school. Yeah, you're not going to be in a power conference, but you're going to cakewalk to a real shot at the college football playoff every single year.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was my point with him maybe thinking.
That's a good point.
It's
a fair point.
It's a good point. It would not have been not have been a good point 4 years ago or whatever before the playoff.
Right.
But the playoff changes things because it opens up a door for those teams.
Because one loss Houston is never going to be a 1 or 2 seed. I don't think.
Right.
But they could be a 3 or 4 pretty easily.
Even undefeated Houston probably isn't a 1 or a 2.
No.
Yeah.
Because you're going to put like the best. You're going to put like 1 loss Alabama or something ahead of undefeated Houston, or you're probably going to put 1 loss Ohio State over or Florida State. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So.
And also
certainly the way that
one loss Houston continually is going to get accepted into the Big 12 because the Big 12 needs teams.
They do.
Yeah.
So whether you're making the playoff or not, you're eventually going to end up in the Big 12, and at that point, I think Houston's probably a better job than Baylor. But
yes, no, absolutely.
Well, here's
welcome
the
to Tom Herman
hoping.
Show.
Here's the hoping that Tom does not find his way into the SEC West.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Okay. Well, I think that's going to do it for us today. Here's hoping for the best on Saturday. Here's hoping our predictions come true. So roll Tide, and we'll see y'all next week.
Roll Tide.